the Internet Prophet. In the year 2000, a user named John Titor appeared on internet forums with an extraordinary claim. He was a soldier from the year 2036, sent back in time on a mission to retrieve an IBM 5100 computer. What followed was 2 years of the most detailed, technically sophisticated, and unnervingly accurate predictions about the future ever recorded online. Titor didn't just claim to be a time traveler, he provided technical blueprints for his time machine, detailed how temporal displacement worked, and explained the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics with a precision that stunned physicists. His machine, he claimed, was a General Electric C204 time displacement unit, installed in a 1967 Chevrolet Corvette, later upgraded to a 1987 Chevrolet Suburban for better cargo capacity. But it was his predictions that made the world pay attention. Writing in 2000 and 2001, Titor accurately predicted that no weapons of mass destruction would be found in Iraq. He warned that CERN's Large Hadron Collider would create miniature black holes, something CERN didn't confirm until 2008. He described a future where people would carry powerful computers in their pockets and communicate through social networks, years before smartphones and social media became ubiquitous. Most chilling of all, he predicted a second American Civil War beginning around 2005, sparked by civil liberties violations after a major terrorist attack. He described federal police actions, the suspension of constitutional rights, and a growing divide between urban and rural populations. Writing months before 9/11, he warned that Americans would willingly trade freedom for security after experiencing domestic terrorism on an unprecedented scale. Titor's technical knowledge was equally impressive. He accurately described how the IBM 5100 contained hidden functions that could debug mainframe code, information IBM didn't publicly acknowledge until years later. A former IBM engineer named Bob Dubke confirmed that only a handful of people knew about these capabilities when Titor was posting. The photographs he provided showed his alleged time machine, complete with detailed technical specifications and what appeared to be an authentic manual. The images demonstrated a level of sophistication that would have been extremely difficult to fake in 2000. Then, as suddenly as he had appeared, John Titor vanished from the forums in March 2001, claiming his mission was complete. His final post read, "I'll be leaving this world line shortly, and this will be my final post. There are only a few safety items I need to check before I leave." 15 years later, many of Titor's predictions about surveillance, social media, and political polarization in America have come to pass with disturbing accuracy. Was John Titor an elaborate hoax, or was he exactly what he claimed to be? A time traveler from a world not so different from our own? The man out of time. On a busy Thursday evening in June 1950, a man suddenly appeared in the middle of Times Square, New York City. He was struck by a taxi and killed instantly. What made this traffic fatality extraordinary wasn't the accident itself, but what police found when they searched the body. The victim's name was Rudolph Fentz, according to the identification in his wallet, but everything else about him was impossible. He was wearing a black frock coat and buttoned shoes that looked like they belonged in the 1870s, yet the clothes appeared brand new, without a trace of age or wear. In his pockets, investigators found brass buttons, a copper token good for a beer at a tavern that had been demolished in 1876, and $70 in old banknotes, money that had been out of circulation for decades. Most puzzling of all was what he didn't have. No identification cards from the modern era, no wallet contents that would connect him to 1950, and no signs of mental illness or confusion that might explain his anachronistic appearance. Witnesses described him as looking around in bewilderment, as if seeing Times Square for the first time, before stepping directly into traffic. Captain Hubert V. Rhyme of the Missing Persons Bureau decided to investigate. What he discovered defied all logic. In the missing persons files from 1876, he found an entry for one Rudolph Fentz, age 29, who had disappeared without a trace while taking an evening walk near his home. The missing man's description matched the accident victim perfectly. Rhyme dug deeper and found more impossible evidence. In the 1939 New York phone directory, there was a listing for a Rudolph Fentz Jr., When contacted, the man claimed his father had vanished mysteriously in 1876 during a walk and was never seen again. He provided a photograph of his father. It was identical to the man killed in Times Square, down to the smallest detail. The case was quietly filed away and forgotten, deemed too strange for public consumption. But retired police officers who worked the case continued to whisper about it for decades. They had witnessed something that challenged everything they understood about the nature of time and reality. Was Rudolph Fentz a victim of some temporal anomaly that transported him 74 years into the future? Or was this an elaborate hoax designed to fool the authorities? The physical evidence, the perfectly preserved 19th century clothing, the authentic period money, and the missing persons records suggest something far stranger than anyone was willing to publicly admit. The Versailles time slip. On August 10, 1901, two respectable English academics, Eleanor Jourdan and Charlotte Moberly, took what they believed would be a simple afternoon stroll through the gardens of the Palace of Versailles. What they experienced instead became one of the most documented and credible cases of time travel ever recorded. The women, both highly educated and skeptical by nature, were exploring the grounds when they began to notice something was wrong. The atmosphere became oppressive and dreamlike. The colors around them seemed to fade, and an inexplicable feeling of melancholy settled over them. They encountered several people dressed in 18th century clothing, who seemed to be going about their daily business as if it were perfectly normal. Near the Petit Trianon, they saw a woman in period dress sitting on the grass, sketching. She looked up at them with an expression of mild curiosity before returning to her work. Later research would reveal that the woman perfectly matched historical descriptions of Marie Antoinette, down to her distinctive hairstyle and facial features. The location where they saw her was precisely where the doomed queen was known to spend her afternoons in the summer of 1789. They encountered gardeners working with tools that belonged to a different century, saw buildings that had been demolished decades earlier, and walked down paths that no longer existed in 1901. Most striking was their interaction with a man in a dark cloak who warned them away from a certain direction. A man they would later realize bore an exact resemblance to the Count de Vaudreuil, one of Marie Antoinette's courtiers. When they returned to their hotel that evening, both women were shaken by the experience. Being academics, they began a methodical investigation that lasted over a decade. They interviewed historians, studied 18th century maps of Versailles, and compared their memories to historical records. Everything they had seen and everyone they had encountered could be verified as historically accurate to the summer of 1789, just months before the French Revolution would change everything forever. What made their account particularly credible was that they conducted their research separately, writing independent accounts before comparing notes. Their descriptions matched not only each other, but also historical records that weren't publicly available in 1901. They had knowledge of architectural details, garden layouts, and even specific individuals that they couldn't have accessed through conventional research. The French authorities took their claims seriously enough to launch their own investigation. They confirmed that the women had accurately described features of Versailles that had existed in 1789 but had been changed or removed by 1901. The paths they walked, the buildings they saw, and even the placement of specific trees matched historical plans that were stored in private archives. Moberly and Jourdan spent 10 years researching and verifying their experience before publishing An Adventure in 1911. Their account sparked international debate and drew both support from psychical researchers and skepticism from materialist scientists. But the physical evidence, their impossible knowledge of 18th century Versailles, remained unexplained. Had two English academics somehow slipped back in time and witnessed Marie Antoinette in her final summer of freedom? Or had they experienced some form of psychic vision so detailed and accurate that it rivaled actual time travel? The mystery endures, leaving us to wonder whether the past sometimes bleeds through into the present in ways we don't yet understand. The Philadelphia Sailor. In the summer of 1955, an astronomer and UFO researcher named Morris Jessup received a letter that would change everything he thought he knew about the nature of reality. The letter was from a man who called himself Carl Allen, later known as Carlos Miguel Allende, and it contained one of the most extraordinary claims in modern history. Allen claimed to have witnessed the U.S. Navy's attempts to achieve invisibility through electromagnetic field manipulation in 1943. According to his account, he was serving aboard the merchant vessel SS Andrew Furuseth when he observed an experiment conducted on the USS Eldridge at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. The experiment, Allen claimed, had worked far too well. Instead of simply becoming invisible to radar, Allen testified that the entire destroyer had vanished from sight before reappearing in a dramatic flash of light. But the crew, he claimed, had been forever changed by the experience. Some had become partially invisible and couldn't turn it off. Others had developed the ability to walk through solid walls, an ability they couldn't control. Most disturbing of all, some had become unstuck in time. Allen described meeting sailors from the Eldridge in bars around Philadelphia who would suddenly freeze mid-sentence, becoming invisible and inaudible to everyone around them for minutes at a time. When they returned, they claimed to have been somewhere else entirely, sometimes in the past, sometimes in the future. They spoke of experiencing their entire lives out of sequence, of being unable to control when and where they existed in time. One sailor, Allen claimed, had simply walked through the wall of a bar and was never seen again. Another had gotten stuck halfway through a wall and died horribly when the effect wore off. The most disturbing case involved a sailor who aged 30 years in a matter of minutes during one of these temporal episodes, dying of old age in front of his terrified shipmates. The Navy, according to Allen, had hushed up the entire experiment and transferred the surviving crew to different ships, but the effects couldn't be contained. The sailors continued to experience temporal displacement for months afterward, appearing and disappearing at random, aging rapidly during episodes, and gradually losing their sanity as they became unstuck from linear time. What made Allen's account compelling wasn't just the detail, but the scientific accuracy of his descriptions of electromagnetic field theory and relativity, knowledge that would have been extremely difficult for a merchant marine to acquire in 1943. His understanding of unified field theory and space-time manipulation was decades ahead of publicly available scientific knowledge. When researchers attempted to track down Allen's claims, they discovered that official records of the Philadelphia experiment had been classified or destroyed. The USS Eldridge's logs from October 1943 were mysteriously missing. Most of the crew members had died or disappeared, and those few who could be contacted refused to discuss their experiences aboard the ship. But some evidence remained. Several Philadelphia area newspapers from late 1943 contained brief mentions of strange incidents involving military personnel who had appeared suddenly in bars and restaurants, acting confused and disoriented before vanishing again. Medical records from naval hospitals showed an unusual number of psychological cases involving temporal displacement, delusions among destroyer crews from the Philadelphia yard. Was Carl Allen a delusional fabricator spinning elaborate tales, or was he one of the few witnesses to humanity's first accidental achievement of time travel? The missing records, the classified nature of the project, and the consistent details of temporal displacement make this one of the most compelling cases for the possibility that time travel isn't just theoretical. It's been accidentally achieved and covered up. The Chaplin Anomaly. In 1928, Charlie Chaplin was premiering his film The Circus at Mann's Chinese Theater in Hollywood. The event was captured on film by studio cameras for posterity. For decades, the footage remained in archives, a simple record of a glamorous Hollywood premiere. But in 2010, when film researcher George Clark was examining the footage frame by frame, he discovered something that shouldn't have been possible. Walking through the background of the shot is a woman in dark clothing holding what appears to be a small black device pressed against her ear. She's clearly speaking into it and listening, just as someone would do with a modern cell phone. But this was 1928. The first mobile phone wouldn't be invented for another 4 decades. Clark examined the footage with digital enhancement and found that the object the woman is holding matches the size, shape, and usage pattern of a modern smartphone or early mobile device. She's holding it at the exact angle someone would use to take a call, and her mouth movements clearly show she's having a conversation. Her walking pattern shows the distracted, purposeful movement of someone engaged in a phone conversation. The woman herself appears anachronistic in other ways. Her clothing, while appearing to be from the 1920s, has subtle differences in cut and fabric that don't match period fashion. Her hair is styled in a way that suggests modern techniques, and her overall appearance has a slightly off quality that suggests someone trying to blend into the past, but not quite succeeding. What makes this case particularly compelling is that the footage is unedited original film stock from 1928. Digital analysis has confirmed that there's no tampering or superimposition. The woman was actually there, at that premiere, holding and using that device. Film experts from Kodak and other companies have verified the authenticity of the footage and confirmed that the effects couldn't have been achieved with 1920s technology. Further investigation revealed other anomalies in the crowd that night. Several people in the background are wearing clothing that, while appearing period appropriate at first glance, shows subtle signs of modern manufacturing techniques. Their postures and mannerisms also suggest people unfamiliar with 1920s social conventions, as if they were visitors from another time trying to blend in. The most intriguing aspect is that no one in the crowd seems to notice or react to the woman with the device. In 1928, such an object would have been absolutely extraordinary and would certainly have drawn attention. The lack of reaction suggests that either everyone present was part of some elaborate deception, or the woman and her device were somehow visible only to the camera. Hollywood historians have been unable to identify the woman, despite having detailed records of everyone who was supposed to be at the premiere. She doesn't appear on any guest lists, wasn't part of the studio system, and has never been identified by any surviving attendees or their families. Was the woman with the phone a time traveler from our era, visiting the golden age of Hollywood? The evidence is tantalizing, but inconclusive. What's certain is that someone in 1928 was using technology that wouldn't exist for decades, and we have the film to prove it. The Håkan Nordqvist Incident. In August 2006, Håkan Nordqvist was renovating his kitchen in his apartment in Kalmar, Sweden, when he discovered something impossible behind his wall, a tunnel that led to what he claims was the year 2042. What makes Nordqvist's story unique among time travel claims is the physical evidence he brought back, a tattoo that shows his name and birth date in a style that doesn't exist in 2006, and a photograph that seems to show him as an 81-year-old man. Nordqvist claims he was reaching behind his kitchen sink to fix a water leak when his arm went through what should have been solid wall. Instead of plaster and wood, he felt empty space. When he investigated further, he found himself crawling through a tunnel that seemed to exist outside normal space-time. On the other side, he emerged into what appeared to be his same apartment, but everything was different. The apartment was decorated in a style that seemed futuristic yet lived in. The technology was recognizable but more advanced. Screens that responded to touch and gesture, furniture that adjusted itself automatically, and appliances that seemed to anticipate needs. Most shocking of all, sitting in a chair watching what appeared to be a three-dimensional television, was an elderly version of himself. The older Håkan, according to Nordqvist, was unsurprised by his younger self's appearance. He explained that this type of temporal contact happened occasionally, and was part of the reason he had chosen to live in the same apartment across multiple decades. The older Håkan showed his younger self around the apartment, pointing out changes and improvements, and explaining how the world had evolved between 2006 and 2042. The future Håkan gave his younger self a tattoo using some kind of advanced technique that left no scarring or healing time. The tattoo, which Nordqvist still bears, shows his name and birth date in a font and style that typographers have been unable to identify. The ink appears to have properties that don't match any tattooing materials available in 2006, showing a depth and luminescence that conventional tattoos lack. Most compelling is the photograph. The older Håkan insisted on taking a picture together, using what appeared to be an advanced camera that produced a finished photograph instantly. The image shows Nordqvist, as he appeared in 2006, standing next to what appears to be himself as an 81-year-old man. Facial recognition software has confirmed that both faces are the same person, aged appropriately, but the aging progression shows details and characteristics that computer aging couldn't have produced in 2006. When investigators examined Nordqvist's apartment, they found no tunnel and no way he could have accessed another space behind his kitchen wall. The building's architectural plans showed solid concrete in the area where he claims to have found the passage. Yet the tattoo remains, and the photograph continues to baffle experts. Medical examination of the tattoo has revealed ink particles that don't match any known tattooing materials. The composition includes elements that are extremely rare and expensive, arranged in a molecular structure that suggests manufacturing techniques beyond current capabilities. The photograph, similarly, appears to be produced using silver halide processes that are more advanced than anything available in 2006. Nordqvist has never sought publicity or profit from his experience. He reported it to local authorities as a curiosity, and only reluctantly agreed to discuss it when investigators became interested in the physical evidence. His account has remained consistent through multiple interviews over more than a decade, and he has shown no signs of the mental health issues that typically accompany elaborate fantasies. Was Håkan Nordqvist's kitchen renovation interrupted by an accidental trip to the future? The physical evidence suggests something extraordinary happened to him that August day, something that left him with artifacts that shouldn't exist in 2006. The Antikythera genius. In 1901, sponge divers working off the Greek island of Antikythera discovered what appeared to be the remains of an ancient Roman shipwreck. Among the artifacts they recovered was a corroded bronze mechanism that would challenge everything we thought we knew about ancient Greek technology, and raise disturbing questions about how such advanced knowledge could have existed more than 2,000 years ago. The Antikythera mechanism, as it came to be known, is an analog computer of staggering complexity. Built around 100 BCE, it uses a sophisticated system of bronze gears to track the movements of the sun, moon, and planets with mathematical precision. It can predict eclipses decades in advance, track the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games, and follow the complex 235-month Metonic cycle used in the ancient Greek calendars. What makes the mechanism extraordinary isn't just its complexity, but the advanced mathematical and mechanical knowledge required to build it. The device incorporates differential gearing, a technology that historians believed wasn't reinvented until the 16th century. Its eclipse prediction system uses calculations that require knowledge of lunar orbital variations that weren't officially discovered until the work of Johannes Kepler in the 17th century. Most puzzling is the mechanism's creator. Analysis of the construction techniques and mathematical approaches reveals that it wasn't built by multiple craftsmen over time, but designed by a single brilliant engineer who possessed knowledge that shouldn't have existed in the ancient world. The precision of the gear ratios, the sophistication of the astronomical calculations, and the elegance of the mechanical solutions all point to a mind that understood both advanced mathematics and precision engineering at a level not seen again for over 1,000 years. Recent research has revealed even more impossible aspects of the device. CT scans have shown that the mechanism originally contained far more functions than previously thought, including the ability to track the movements of all known planets and predict their positions decades in advance. This requires knowledge of planetary orbital mechanics that wasn't discovered until the work of Copernicus, Kepler, and Newton. The mathematical principles embedded in the device include concepts that wouldn't be formally developed until the Renaissance. The gear ratios use approximations of irrational numbers that demonstrate an understanding of advanced number theory. The mechanical solutions to complex astronomical calculations show engineering principles that seem to anticipate developments in clockwork that were centuries away. Perhaps most disturbing is what happened to this knowledge. The Antikythera mechanism represents a level of technological sophistication that vanished completely from the historical record. No other ancient Greek devices show similar complexity, and the mathematical and engineering knowledge required to build it seems to have disappeared without a trace. It's as if someone with modern knowledge of astronomy and engineering appeared in ancient Greece, built this device, and then vanished, taking their knowledge with them. Who was the anonymous genius who created the Antikythera mechanism? How did they possess knowledge of planetary mechanics, differential gearing, and precision engineering that wouldn't be rediscovered for more than a millennium? The device sits in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, a bronze testament to the possibility that someone with knowledge from the future once walked among the ancient Greeks. Leonardo's impossible visions. Leonardo da Vinci died in 1519, but his private notebooks contain designs and concepts that wouldn't become reality for centuries. While history remembers him as a Renaissance genius ahead of his time, a closer examination of his work reveals knowledge so advanced and so precise that it raises troubling questions about where his ideas truly came from. In his Codex Atlanticus, Leonardo sketched designs for helicopters, submarines, tanks, parachutes, and flying machines with internal combustion engines. These weren't vague conceptual drawings, but detailed engineering blueprints with precise specifications that demonstrate a deep understanding of aerodynamics, hydraulics, and mechanical engineering. His helicopter design, for example, incorporates principles of lift and torque that wouldn't be formally understood until the work of Sir George Cayley in the 19th century. His anatomical studies show impossible accuracy for someone working without modern medical knowledge. Leonardo's drawings of the human heart include details of valve function and blood flow that wouldn't be discovered until William Harvey's work in the 17th century. His brain dissections show understanding of neurological structures and functions that wouldn't be identified until the advent of modern neuroscience. Most puzzling are his designs for machines that incorporate technologies that didn't exist in the Renaissance. His sketches include ball bearings, internal combustion engines, and even what appears to be a steam turbine. His flying machine designs demonstrate knowledge of wing loading, center of gravity, and control surfaces that shows a sophisticated understanding of flight dynamics that took humanity centuries to develop. Leonardo's military inventions are equally anachronistic. His tank design includes features like sloped armor for deflecting projectiles, and a system of gears that suggests knowledge of automotive transmission principles. His fortress designs incorporate angular bastions and overlapping fields of fire that wouldn't become standard military architecture until the age of gunpowder warfare was well advanced. But perhaps most mysterious are his astronomical observations. Leonardo's notebooks contain references to the moons of Jupiter, the phases of Venus, and the rotation of the Earth. Knowledge that wouldn't be available until Galileo's telescopic observations nearly a century later. His sketches show accurate depictions of lunar craters and what appear to be observations of Saturn's rings, phenomena that were beyond the capability of Renaissance optics. Recent analysis of Leonardo's notebooks has revealed an even more disturbing pattern. Many of his most advanced concepts appear suddenly in his work, with no developmental sketches or experimental phases. It's as if he already possessed complete knowledge of how these technologies worked, and was simply documenting them for posterity. The handwriting analysis of these advanced sections shows subtle differences from Leonardo's normal script, as if they were copied from another source rather than original thoughts. The mathematical calculations that accompany his designs use techniques and formulas that wouldn't be developed until the work of Newton and Leibniz. Was Leonardo da Vinci simply a genius centuries ahead of his time, or did he have access to knowledge from the future? His notebooks read less like the experimental work of an inventor, and more like the technical documentation of someone recording technologies they had already seen in operation. The precision of his designs and the accuracy of his scientific observations suggest a man who wasn't inventing the future, but remembering it. The Liverpool time slips. Bold Street in Liverpool, England, has earned the reputation as one of the world's most active time slip zones. Since the 1960s, hundreds of people have reported stepping out of the present day and finding themselves in Liverpool's past, sometimes for just a few seconds, sometimes for several minutes. What makes these reports particularly compelling is their consistency and the number of independent witnesses who describe identical experiences. The most well-documented case occurred in July 1996, when Frank and Carol Sager were shopping on Bold Street. Frank had gone into a bookshop while Carol waited outside. When he emerged, Bold Street had changed completely. The modern shops were gone, replaced by businesses from the 1960s. People were dressed in period clothing, and the cars were all vintage models. The street signs showed different names, and even the pavement looked different. Frank wasn't alone in this experience. Several other shoppers were walking around looking confused and disoriented, clearly experiencing the same phenomenon. They exchanged glances of mutual bewilderment before the street suddenly snapped back to the present day, leaving them shaken but back in familiar surroundings. Investigation revealed that Frank's description of 1960s Bold Street was historically accurate down to the smallest detail. The shop names he mentioned, their exact locations, and even the street layout matched historical records and photographs from that era. He described businesses and architectural details that had been demolished and forgotten decades before, information he couldn't have known through conventional means. The pattern continues. In 2008, Sarah Martinez entered what she thought was a trendy boutique on Bold Street, only to find herself in a 1970s department store, complete with period furnishings, staff in vintage uniforms, and merchandise from decades ago. She attempted to purchase a dress, but was told her modern money wasn't acceptable. When she stepped back onto the street, she was back in 2008, but the shop she had entered no longer existed. Security cameras have occasionally captured these incidents. Footage from 2006 shows pedestrians suddenly changing direction mid-stride, as if avoiding obstacles that aren't visible on camera. Their behavior suggests they're seeing a different environment than what the cameras record. Most striking are shots of people who appear to be interacting with individuals who don't show up on the footage. Local historians have discovered that Bold Street sits on a site with unusual geographical properties. The street was built over a series of ancient tunnels and underground chambers that may create electromagnetic anomalies. Geological surveys have found unusual mineral deposits in the bedrock that some theorists believe could affect the local space-time continuum. The time slips aren't random. They tend to occur during specific weather conditions, usually on overcast days with high humidity and electromagnetic activity. The experiences follow consistent patterns. People step out of one time period and into Liverpool's past, usually the 1960s or 1970s, experience the past as completely real and solid, then return to the present without warning. Most compelling is the fact that people experiencing time slips on Bold Street often encounter the same past events and locations. Multiple witnesses have described identical shops, the same street musicians, and even the same conversations overheard in the past. It's as if they're all accessing the same temporal snapshot of Liverpool's history. Are the time slips of Bold Street evidence that the past continues to exist alongside the present, occasionally bleeding through into our awareness? The consistency of the reports, the historical accuracy of the descriptions, and the independent corroboration from multiple witnesses suggest that something extraordinary is happening on this unremarkable shopping street in Liverpool. The Sleeping Prophet's Future Visions. Edgar Cayce earned the nickname the Sleeping Prophet for his ability to enter a trance state and provide detailed information about subjects he had no conscious knowledge of. But it was his predictions about the future that suggest he may have been accessing information from time periods that hadn't yet occurred. Between 1901 and 1944, Cayce made over 14,000 recorded predictions while in his trance state. Many of these dealt with future technological developments, geopolitical changes, and natural disasters that wouldn't occur until decades after his death in 1945. What makes his predictions remarkable isn't just their accuracy, but the specific technical details he provided about technologies that didn't exist in his lifetime. In 1935, Cayce predicted that people would someday communicate instantly with anyone in the world using small devices they carried in their pockets. He described a global network of information that people would access for education, entertainment, and commerce, essentially describing the internet and smartphones with startling accuracy. He even mentioned that this technology would create new forms of addiction and social isolation, problems that wouldn't emerge until the digital age. His medical predictions were equally precise. In 1928, he predicted that scientists would discover that DNA carried hereditary information and could be manipulated to treat disease. He described what we now know as genetic therapy, stem cell research, and even CRISPR gene editing, using terminology that wouldn't be developed until decades later. His understanding of cellular biology and genetics was so advanced that modern researchers still study his medical readings for insights. Casey's geological predictions have proven unnervingly accurate. He predicted the discovery of oil fields in specific locations years before they were found. He described changes in weather patterns and natural disasters with precise timing and locations. Most famously, he predicted that Atlantis would rise again, which some researchers now connect to recent discoveries of underwater structures near Bimini that match his descriptions. His predictions about space exploration were remarkably detailed for someone working decades before the space age. He described humans traveling to the moon, the development of space stations, and the discovery that Mars once had water, all concepts that were purely theoretical in the 1930s. He even mentioned the health effects of long-term space travel and the psychological challenges astronauts would face. But perhaps most intriguing were his descriptions of future human consciousness development. Casey predicted that humans would develop enhanced psychic abilities, that science would prove the existence of life after death, and that new forms of energy based on consciousness itself would revolutionize technology. While these predictions haven't fully materialized, recent research in quantum consciousness and the observer effect in physics suggests he may have been describing real future developments. What made Casey unique wasn't just his predictions, but his apparent ability to access information from multiple time periods. In trance, he would describe ancient civilizations with archaeological accuracy and future technologies with engineering precision, as if he was personally observing these different eras. His descriptions of future events included sensory details, sounds, smells, and physical sensations that suggested direct experience rather than psychic impression. Medical examination of Casey during his trance states revealed brain activity patterns that didn't match any known psychological condition. His brain showed unusual gamma wave activity in regions associated with temporal processing, as if he was literally accessing different time periods rather than simply predicting the future based on current trends. Was Edgar Casey a genuine psychic, or was he somehow traveling through time during his trance states? His remarkably detailed and accurate knowledge of both past and future suggests that his consciousness may have operated outside the normal constraints of linear time, making him one of the most documented time travelers in history. Conclusion: these 10 cases represent some of the most compelling evidence that time travel might not be confined to science fiction. From internet prophets and anachronistic artifacts to photographic evidence and documented time slips, the pattern is clear. People throughout history have claimed experiences that transcend the normal flow of time. What unites these cases isn't just the extraordinary nature of the claims, but the physical evidence that accompanies them. Photographs that shouldn't exist, knowledge that couldn't have been acquired through normal means, and artifacts that display technologies from different eras. While skeptics can explain away individual cases, the cumulative weight of evidence suggests that our understanding of time and reality may be fundamentally incomplete. Whether these individuals were genuine time travelers, recipients of information from the future, or something else entirely, they remind us that the universe is far stranger and more mysterious than our current science can explain. Time, it seems, may not be the fixed, linear progression we assume it to be, and if that's true, then the future and the past may be far more accessible than we dare to imagine.